This is episode 17 of the Remix Your World podcast with Robin Munro. Welcome to Remix Your World. I'm Allison Kalagna, global DJ and music producer turned life remixer and personal growth coach. In each episode, we bring you real talk, inspiring stories, and heartfelt conversations of personal transformation to help you uplift and amplify your life. This is the Remix Your World podcast. Colorado's largest independent graffiti and street art project and event, founded by Denver graffiti artist Robin Munro, Crush, has been taking over the streets of RiNo neighborhood since 2010. With a passion for graffiti and street art as well as his community, Munro aimed to create an event that showcases the amazing artistic talents he saw not only in Denver, but also across the world. Crush celebrates art, urban beautification, creativity, and culture by enriching our community through an arts festival like no other. We believe that public art leads to an improved community as a catalyst for safety, cleanliness, creativity, and conversation. Centered around empowering artists, Crush is committed to reflecting and diversifying the urban landscape and the unique voice of a community, bringing art out of the galleries and into the streets. Crush started and still finds its home in the RiNo Art District, which defines itself as a community where art is made. Crush celebrates the craft of graffiti and street artists who bring life to walls while maintaining the unique cultural identity in this rapidly evolving community. The annual event transforms streets and alleys into open-air galleries. Crush raises awareness of the cultural significance and importance of art for all ages and all demographics that may not have had the opportunity to experience it for themselves. Crush offers art inspiration through this urban craft. The organization serves as a forum for community engagement and creative expression, inviting locals and visitors to engage in this rich history and forward-thinking public art in Denver, Colorado. Join the experience during the annual event in September or visit the Crush walls year-round in the RiNo Arts District.
Yo, check this out.
What's up, world? It's episode 17 of the Remix Your World podcast with me, Allison Kalagna, and today I'm talking to Crush Walls founder Robin Munro. If you don't know about Crush Walls, then I highly encourage you to go and look up crushwalls.org, which I will link up in the show notes. But it's an amazing art experience that happens in Denver every year where street artists, graffiti artists, and local artists all come together and completely transform the RiNo district in Denver. It is just growing each year, and this year was amazing. They had Shepard Fairey, who was famous for the Hope campaign from Obama in 2008, and another artist that I really have been getting into lately, Cryptic, whose vibe is kind of got this like Middle Eastern mystical. It feels very spiritual to me. At least that's how I interpret it. I absolutely love his work. So I was really excited to see those two come to Denver. So without further ado, let's jump on in with Robin. I want to have a conversation with him about how this all came about, how he even started Crush, his own journey as an artist, his love for graffiti, and what he feels that he wants to bring into this world through art. So here's my conversation with Robin Munro. All right, so welcome, Robin. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic. How did you feel about our first snow yesterday?
I was pretty excited. It's allowed a few chances for me to use my fireplace for the first time.
Nice.
And hang out with my newborn son and my wife and relax. And it was funny, the day before I was raking up because maybe a quarter of our leaves fell in our front yard. And then after the snow, I mean, every single leaf is now on the ground. So it's like I just got to go back out there again. But I like it. It's nice, and it's cool to see it starting a little bit early this year. Maybe we'll have a good season up on the mountain.
Yeah, hopefully, because last year was late. It wasn't. So I'm looking forward to it too. I'm excited. Do you ski? or snowboard?
I grew up skiing and snowboarding. I first started out skiing, and then when snowboarding came around, I was also a young little skater kid, so I
Nice.
adapted to that pretty quickly and fell in love with that. So yeah, I do a little bit of both, but mostly snowboard.
That's awesome. Now, where did you grow up? Are you from Colorado?
Well, so I was born outside of Chicago, but I moved here when I was like 4.
Okay.
And we lived in Westminster for a while, and then we moved up to Idaho Springs. So I grew up in Idaho Springs, which is a small mountain town. It's where the gold rush began. And I graduated in '98 and moved to Denver. But while I was in high school, I also came down here and was in vocation school and went to a technical school called Warren Tech and studied graphic design.
Nice. Okay. So now, did you always, even as a kid, were you always sketching and drawing? How did you come to find, like, oh wow, this is a gift, this is what I want to do?
Oh, so growing up, my mother was an artist, and she went to school for English and fine arts. And she used to use us as her muses. And watching Saturday morning cartoons, my sister and I would sit there, and she would sketch us and draw us. And I was always, fascinated with her work, and always inquiring like what was it about and why she did it, and da 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 da, and was super inspired by her. My father, on the other hand, was a computer science guy, and I would ask him to draw something, and he couldn't draw a stick figure, and I would just look perplexed, like I thought everyone had this gift, So I was inspired as a young man by my mother, and then really into comic books and that kind of type of thing, and I was never like what I would consider like the popular type of kid. I was kind of introverted. I was what they call ADD, which I think is bogus.
Right.
I was, yeah, it's like a made-up disease. But I was dyslexic, but I was also ambidextrous. So I was using both hands to draw and to write with, and it was just interesting time growing up. So for me, it was sort of an escape. It was like artwork was my way to create my own little world and create my own little environments and that sort of thing, and escape kind of this mundane school system that we had in place. So that was kind of like my inspiration. And then I was into skateboarding and out in the streets and wilding out and rough little youngster. So I quickly adapted into graffiti art, and especially once I started going to Warren Tech, I was, inspired by some friends and some artists that were there that were, into the scene already, and it just blew my mind. It was this encompassing, like, art movement that no one could control or, try to label as one thing or another, and it was just like a voice for people who were voiceless, and that kind of inspired me to move forward.
Wow. Yeah. So do you remember what it was like when you first, saw your first, tagged wall or some sort of graffiti image that you were just like, whoa?
Yeah, I guess it was like more like magazines and and things back then. But when I was in junior high and high school is when the internet came out, and I started, I was able to reach a lot further and to see, what artists were doing and where things were going on around the world and other cities and that sort of thing. And that kind of just was like awe-inspiring, like seeing not just graffiti and tags and writing and stuff like that, but seeing like full on productions and full colored pieces and like characters and like it was just amazing to me.
Wow. So when did you obviously, so you're starting to do that in school, and then were your teachers pretty supportive as well? I mean, I know you had support from your parents, but who else were sort of allies for you when you were trying to come up?
Well, I didn't do very well in school to begin with. Like I said, the ADD thing and dyslexia, and once they start labeling you, things like that, they start looking at you differently. So in high school, I had a teacher, my art teacher, Mrs. Unselt, who was a huge support. And by the time I was like a freshman, junior, I was in senior portfolio already, and she just had an adoring support system in that class. And then I was in and out of trouble, and I was in school suspension a lot. So my in-school suspension teacher, Mrs. Steele, understood. And as long as I could cram out all my work within the first half day, while I was in trouble and in an ISS, and she would just let me draw the whole rest of the day.
Oh, wow.
And stuff like that. So she was pretty supportive. Yeah, so those are the first, kind of people outside of my home life that were supportive in what I wanted to do. And Mrs. Unseld was definitely a huge provider in what I had as far as being able to evolve and inspire me and stuff.
That's amazing. Have you spoken to her since?
Yeah, I have not. And I actually heard that she recently had passed away. So, yeah, so that was pretty sad to hear. Mrs. Steele is still around, and we're communicating, connected a little bit on Facebook, and I was probably surprised a lot of people at the success in my art career and the evolution of what Crush is, and I think there were some that really saw something in me, but there were others that were skeptical, like this kid's probably just going to end up in trouble or in jail or something like that because of the direction he's going. It's funny. I got in trouble, tagging school and getting caught up in that kind of stuff, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, I got commissioned to paint on some lockers at this office space, and it was pretty surreal to go from getting expelled from doing graffiti in school to getting commissioned and paid to do almost the same thing on lockers again as an adult. Just kind of put things in perspective a little bit for me.
That's amazing. Gosh, I remember you saying that now. I remember I broke into school once in like 6th grade. I grew up in Dubai. And I broke into the school and I put markers and white out everything all over the place, and I got in so much trouble.
Yeah.
Oops.
It was me and my friends were just wrecking stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of used my locker because I didn't use it for books or anything like that. So everyone used my locker, and it was the bottom locker, so it's easy if you just hold up the little lever, the latch, and just kick the bottom corner, it'll just pop open. So everyone kind of had all their stuff stashed in there, and the school was cracking down, and they were pulling people in, and they finally pulled me in, and then they searched my locker, and they found like all of our paraphernalia in there, and then I got expelled, and I got sent to a different school, and in-house kind of treatment, problematic kids school down here in Denver, and then did a better part of my junior year there. So after that, like my senior year, I kind of got my shit together and graduated by the skin of my teeth, but still was able to do so. So I actually did make my parents proud. I graduated on time and was able to pull through.
Oh, that's amazing. So when was this idea? How did the idea even come up for you with Crush? What was happening at the time that then you thought, I have to do this?
Well, I was super inspired by events like Scribble Jam, things like that. I was heavy into the hip hop scene in the community. I was going to school again for graphic design and was working construction, and then soon phased into doing kind of faux finishing, like decorative painting, like in houses and stuff like that, kind of high end painting. I was still skating and writing graffiti and being a wild young man. And I became a resident artist at Exto Event Center, and I had been painting murals all over the city, and word of mouth was always like the best way to get work. And a lot of times it was, hey, can we just paint your wall? It looks like you've got a graffiti problem. And then they would just allow us to paint and do whatever we wanted and have free expression. And then that rolled into actually doing more characters and background stuff, and then getting commissioned to do that. So going back to being a resident artist at Exto and Tracks, they would hire me to do murals on the inside for different events they were doing, whether it be Halloween or New Year's or Pride or whatever. I would always do like a theme murals inside for them. So they approached me and said that they had the alleyway privatized, and they wanted to commission me to do a mural there. So I started thinking, well, this is a great opportunity. So I asked them, hey, give me a stipend for the supply, and instead of like paying me a stipend, help staff an event that I want to do. So I invited all my friends. The first artist I brought out was Scribe with the DF crew. And, we painted and we had like a little jam, and it was all hip hop inspired. There was a breakdancing competition, MC battle, beatbox, like beat machine battle, and then just the graffiti art, the highlighted the graffiti art. To me, it was like a lot of times the graffiti artist, that's the hardest medium to, become relevant in and like make even a living off of. Like people weren't really making a living off of it, where, this is the only element that you can get arrested for, or like, stuff can get pretty crazy on the streets. So to me, it was cool to like give this movement a little bit bigger of a voice, and where like visual artists a lot of times were always, not getting paid, getting the shaft, you know what I mean? Like, come out for exposure, whatever it may be.
Right.
Which is all fine, but, people die from exposure.
Yeah. Yeah, we're artists. You have to make a living also.
Totally. So, to me, it was like, this was inspiring for me to help elevate this part of the scene, and, try to elevate the Denver community, because I felt like the Denver community was overlooked a lot. There's amazing talent here. And I felt like a lot of times when people started to make it, they would move to New York or California or somewhere else, because, there just was not a huge graffiti scene that was recognized, and there wasn't a lot of a huge contemporary art scene, for lack of a better term, and what everyone thought, like this was a small cow town. So that kind of what inspired me to help elevate this event. And at the first couple of years, I was trying to figure out, what do I name this? What's the point? Like what's the direction? Like, how do I make this catchy, make it, appealing to everyone? And the first year, I called it Universe Juice, which is kind of like, you get the juice. It's like you got to go into it. You're making it happen.
Yeah.
The second year, I actually ended up moving it down a little bit further. I met a gentleman named Ken Wolf, who owned this property further south, and had some bigger walls that were easier to see and approach. And the first year I did it down here, it was called Chi Alchemy. And the reason for that was a gentleman that introduced me to Ken owned a gym over here, and it was called Chi. And to me, it was like chi is like the energy that flows through everything.
Yeah.
Then alchemy is the ability to turn something into, or nothing into something. Like being able to just create with whatever elements you have, and being able to make, turn coal into gold type thing. So that's kind of that kind of evolution that kind of started and ended up being to where it is now. For the short run, things have definitely evolved over the years with the number of people that I've worked with. And I think we can get back into that a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing where it has come. So do you remember your first sort of roadblocks that kind of hit, that you came up against, and like a moment when you were kind of like, oh man, I can't do this. I'm taking on too much?
I think, it was super heavy graffiti based for a long period of time. And I had a lot of writers out here from the East Coast, West Coast, and there was no street art. And then it quickly started getting to where when we had the event, graffiti was popping up all over during the event, and unwanted areas, and da-da-da-da. And the light would shine on me, like, this is something that you're creating, and that, you're the cause of this problem, when in all reality it was already happening in this neighborhood to begin with. But being now that I was on the forefront of like this evolution of this event and this culture, I had to kind of step up. So in doing so, I had to allow other types of artwork and artists to come in and help evolve it. So for the longest time, I was like kind of anti-street art and kind of, whatever, blah, blah, those guys don't know what it's really about. But soon started to open up to allowing street art in, and elevating and helping, street artists and stuff like that, which actually turned out to be a blessing, because it opened my eyes to a lot more of this world and this culture. How many people maybe even do both, street art and graffiti? How many street artists started out as graffiti artists and that sort of thing? So, I had to make an adjustment, and since then, it's still about 50-50 graffiti and street art. But that was kind of the first roadblock was, what am I doing out here? What am I, like, cool. We got all the community, like the graffiti community, to come together and work well together and paint together, but what's the purpose of this event? Like, what I really started to think about what was my end all goal for this event.
Right.
And so that was sort of the first roadblock was, yeah, the graffiti scene needs to be elevated and we need to have a platform, but also like there's other people who are in this scene who are doing things and making amazing moves and amazing artwork that I had, this built up like negative connotation about, these people aren't part of culture, but in all reality, we're all pretty much the same. So that was kind of the first roadblock, and it was hard at first, but it was very rewarding in the end.
Yeah. It reminds me of almost like, in terms of music, right? So like in club music, it's like you have the mainstream music and then you have underground music, right? And it's like underground kids don't want to, like play with mainstream and vice versa, right? It's like this thing, but like it honestly, it's like the both of it together is what actually brings it to a bigger level, because it's like, I've always, somebody had asked me once, they were like, what do you feel about dubstep, right? And like, I'm not a dubstep fan, right? And I was always like, listen, whatever, I always felt this way. It's like all of those fad genres or whatever of electronic music always brings people back to house music. So for me, it's like, I don't care. Let the masses kind of find their way, and then they come back to find some things that are kind of raw. So I feel like that in a sense of like the street art and the graffiti, in a sense, it's like you need, like, both feed each other, and I'm sure there are street artists that are like, man, I wish I could do more graffiti, and then vice versa, it's like,
yeah, totally. And even like going back to like growing up and skiing and snowboarding, like when snowboarding first came out, it was very much sort of that same. It was like snowboarding was raw, and it was like there were certain resorts that wouldn't even allow snowboarders, and this like rivalry. But it was funny at the same time. It's like you guys are almost doing the same thing, but you're not too far off from each other. And then nowadays you see like skiers and snowboarders alike riding together, skiing together, like out there on the mountain, jibbing, like hitting the same jumps, hitting the same rails, and like supporting each other. And it's awesome to see. And it's awesome to see that that's kind of evolving within the graffiti and street art culture. But at the same time too, it's like graffiti and being in the streets and doing this is a very raw form, and it's still can be very dangerous. That's why you probably see less females involved in doing it. Starting to see more and more get involved as the culture evolves. But again, it still can be very dangerous. You're out there in the streets, you're in alleyways, you're operating huge, heavy equipment and for street art and stuff like that. And that's, I think, why it was such a male-driven, dominated, movement. And for a while there, like women didn't really have much as far as like equality, and like I still feel like now the female voice is just really starting to be heard a lot more, just in social scenes and just around the United States. Like the women, they're like the feminine energies is becoming stronger and stronger, which is, I think, an amazing thing. And to me, I think it could help, and it could help, one, empowering them, giving them a voice, but two, softening this hardened edge of society and what the male dominance is. I think it's very important that we celebrate the females and try to elevate them as much as possible, and which is hard because a lot of things need to change as far as social like norms are concerned. Like even in hip hop, it was always like this bitch and this hoe and this and that and the other. And that was more like gangster rap and stuff like that. But man, it's interesting to really see how people are really starting to awaken to what, is real, and like, what they're doing, and being more cognizant of what they're saying and what they're allowing themselves to be a part of and listening to. And even myself now, I'm like, man, there's like music that I'm like, I used to love this, and now I listen to it and I'm like, oh, this is poisoning me. Like,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and I think, and that might have to do a little bit too with like having a newborn boy, and thinking about, how I want him to be raised, and how, I'm affecting society and the people around me, and like my choices, no matter how big or small they are, will, have a great effect on me, and could ripple out even further than what I can realize.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like, we look back at movies that we used to look at as kids too, and when you watch it now, you're like, holy shit, that was not okay.
Totally. I mean, I look back at like that. You can't do that on television, where the kids would get slimed and stuff like that.
Right.
And there's an episode where they're talking about the media and how it's controlling people, and it's like brainwashing people, and like, this is a kids TV show like in the 80s.
Wow. Yeah.
And like, they were like so ahead of their time, and like, they were calling it out then, and like, it's just interesting to see like, what's happening now with the media, and like, misinformation, and like, you can barely trust half of what you hear, or even half of what you see now. Like, things can be faked and staged, and
Yeah.
it's just such crazy times we live in. Like, there's always been a race thing going on, and this like vision and race, because of these old ways of thinking, and how our history of becoming even what America is based off of genocide, and based off of
Yeah.
slavery and stuff like that. And these are hard truths that we're facing now still, and it's just delicate things that are going on. And then not only that, even further is going back to the whole women's rights. It's like, man, that's half the population. That's racing. That's all across the board. That women weren't being treated properly and fairly, and like, it was just this male-driven thing. And it's interesting to see now again how this feminine energy is starting to take a bigger role in what's going on, and as all these cultures are meshing together and stuff like that, it's creating a lot of uproar, and a lot of difficult conversations that need to be had, and by all means, but at the same time, it's like, we still need to be gentle how we approach these conversations and talk to each other, like, because I'm not responsible for what happened, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, just because of the association of my race, whatever it may be. But there's still that hurt that's been felt and is being felt, and there's still like a lot of people out there that feel certain ways, and that are racist, and that are sexist, and are bigots still, and that's a very difficult thing to deal with. But it's amazing that at the same time, with media and stuff like that these conversations can be had, and like, there's no hiding behind anything anymore. Like, people are exposing like this and that and the other, and this is injustice and that, da da da. And I think it's great, but again, like, the dialogue needs to be one that's conducive to change, and not just furthering the aggression and division. So that's kind of my feeling on that.
Yeah. When you sit down to do a piece, so does all of that kind of come up for you, of like, how do you figure out what your intention is for that?
Each piece is extremely different for me, and I don't feel like I have an exact certain style that I have stuck myself to. With graffiti, I have a certain kind of ism, and of course, there's always going to be a little bit of, in the details, you can tell it's my work. But when I think about each piece, it's like, what am I trying to achieve? I don't really do too much political stuff. A lot of my stuff is based off of dreams, or off of things that inspire me.
Okay.
But I try not to do any work that's going to be like, political topics or hot topics that are happening. And I'm not really that type of street artist.
Right.
And I try not to think too much of like what my target audience is, or what I'm trying to portray towards them. because I feel like that's not really being true to yourself then. Then this is my own opinion about my work.
Yeah.
So my work is like what's inspiring me and makes me, feel certain ways. Like when I was younger and I was more angsty and more, like angry at the world, it was definitely a little bit darker. But as I've gotten older, it's gotten a lot more softer and a lot more, you know, open to the whole public as opposed to just like one certain demographic of people that will appreciate my work. But again, I don't really do too much work that's geared towards, political statements or, statements that are about what's going on. I feel like so much negative energy is going out into the world about that kind of stuff that
Yeah.
I'd rather just try to, do things that make people feel good and people think, like, this is amazing to look at. This does it make me feel a certain way, or, it's not pulling at any kind of heartstrings or pulling at any kind of, some kind of inner like conflict or social conflict and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where my work is.
Yeah.
I like to do very abstract 3D graffiti letters. I like doing portraits and characters and stuff like that. I try to stay away from, really painting like famous people or inspirational people. But if I do, I'd like to, try to focus. If I were to, I'd try to focus on people that are powerful and uplifting and inspiring, as opposed to, dogging Donald Trump or, dogging someone that's like negative, because I just feel, when you give energy to negative energy, you're just giving it more energy.
Yeah. And it comes back. It's like, emulate what you want to receive.
Totally. So I guess mine is just trying to create an experience that I enjoy and that I hope other people enjoy without worrying too much about what I'm trying to create for them to enjoy. It's more about like what I'm going to enjoy. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So how do you go about inviting artists? So, I mean, this year, you had Shepard Fairey, Cryptic. I mean, you had some big people come in. How did that even come about?
Well, so before it was just me, and I invited like all the local graffiti crews and writers to come out and paint. And then when it turned into a little more street art, I was working with this group called Like-Minded Productions, and that was with Jonathan Lamb. And so he started helping me curate street art and inviting artists out here for that. And it was awesome. It was a great movement in the right direction. I started meeting more street artists and learning even more about that culture and applications and everyone's different styles and techniques. And it was amazing. And then shortly after, the RiNo Art District started helping support us about 3-4 years ago now. And in doing so, they actually hired John's partner, Lindsay, and she started helping raising money and curating and stuff like that, and was a huge support system in that as well. So it was basically just kind of like us three at one point that were just kind of curating everything and deciding, who got the paint, who didn't, who what, that kind of thing. Right. We wanted to have that whole range from the big international artist names to all the local graffiti crews to emerging artists, and giving them a chance to, paint alongside with each other and just kind of leveling that platform a little bit to, giving those artists an opportunity to evolve and meet other artists that inspire them. And then this year, we formulated a committee of some local artists, street artists, graffiti artists, and artists that were in the community, artists and people that were in a community that were art supporters. We had someone we had Lisa from the UAF. We had some local business and property owners, and we had the RiNo Art District on board and on this committee. And then this is the first year that we did a call for entry, where everyone had the opportunity to apply, and then the committee voted themselves, and then we pulled all the votes, and then whoever got those top numbers was who we decided to invite out. And then as far as the international artists, that was still something that was internally curated.
Yeah.
But I think this next year, I think it would be awesome to get the committee to come together and say, hey, here's our top 10 for each person, and then do that same thing and see, oh, this person made it across the board, so they're obviously coming in, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So my goal in doing so is to be able to provide the local artists and the local community a bigger voice in who participates, as opposed to it being curated by, me and a couple other people.
Right. Yeah.
Which worked for a while, but as this thing evolves and grows, like, I want everyone to, this is Crush isn't something that I own or I've ever owned. It's not like something that I want to be like, this is just mine.
Right.
This is my movement. This is a community-based movement, and the more the community is involved and the more the community has a voice, the better off we'll be. But the community has to be willing to step up and take that role and do so. So it's been interesting to see how it's evolved, but I'm really happy with where it's going and what this next year is going to look like.
Oh, that's amazing. What do you envision, if you could fast forward 10 years from now, what do you envision Crush to be?
Well, it's turning into like a 360-day type thing going on. I'm opening up a location here in RiNo called Headquarters.
Nice.
And it's going to be urban apparel, spray paint, small gallery space, but we're going to do tours and workshops and stuff like that, and provide a space where people can come year round and learn about what we're doing. In 10 years, I hope to have made the right connections within the community, not only with, developers and property owners and stuff like that, but people who write grants and, being the nonprofit, and people who are good at education and work well with the community, and opening up a youth-based youth facility that's all like art encompassing, with recording studios and all that kind of stuff, all that like kind of underground kind of art culture, highlighted within the school, but it'd be free for youth, ages 12 through 25.
Yeah.
And as you earn certain credit hours, you could apply for certain jobs and positions within the school too. So it's kind of like this revolving door of keeping the community connected and having that voice and a safe space to come and create, and not like charging like, you would have to for a trade school or college or stuff like that. We have rec centers all over the place that, are practically free for people in the community to come and like build on their physical strength.
Yeah.
I feel like we need a place for the creatives to be able to gather and do the same thing, and be able to participate in their growth and development without having to be charged an arm and a leg, or having to be brought up in a certain part of the community to be able to afford to go to a certain type of school to get that kind of education.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my goal in the next 5 to 10 years, is to try to get it evolved to something like that. And to me, I feel like this could be a huge social change, and be a platform for people to come together and grow.
I think it's amazing. I love that. I love the sound of that. I love the idea of that. You've got a yes from me to help you in music or in any way, in coaching, whatever. I'm a yes to it.
I mean, I was inspired as a young man when I was living down here in Denver. There was this place called The Spot, and it was just like that. There was breakdancing rooms, there was recording studios, there was computer labs. We had the whole building inside spray painted and decked out with characters and graffiti, and
nice.
Every Thursday they did a free barbecue for the youth, and like you could do community service there, but then you could also get your GED and stuff like that.
Wow.
Which I think is an important part. But I want to stay closer to that root of having a space where these kids can come
and create
and feel safe within an environment. And you got to have, yes, the kids will be evolving into teaching positions and other parts and positions within that, but there's always still got to be like that committee or that group of people that oversees things and is making sure that everything is running right and things aren't getting weird and people are treating each other equally and that sort of thing. So it's going to take a while to build up to something like that, but I feel like Denver and even this 5 Points, RiNo, Globeville area, whatever you want to call it, RiNo Art District, all these surrounding neighborhoods, is hungry for that, and I see the opportunity, and I see the potential for something like that to sprout here, not only here but probably in all kinds of other cities. And I feel like we're in the motion for that kind of direction, and I'm just really excited to see, if that can all come together.
I believe in you. I think it will. I'm excited about it. And I mean, Denver is like, I was just the other day, I was just like, God, I just love what is happening here. It's just like, it's becoming, man, it's just like growing and growing in all different directions, but like in a good way in terms of art. And I'm really happy to be in Denver. I'm glad I left Miami, I think like 8 years ago, and came here, and it's been amazing. I love that.
It's funny you say that. I see from all angles. Like I love the new people coming here, and there's so many new people from all over. I love the way that some of the direction and the development is going, and the growth of this city. But at the same time, I see and hear the voice of some of these other parts of the community that are talking about gentrification and inequality still. It's kind of it kind of gets tricky, especially being in the position that I'm in, where I'm working with, from local graffiti artists and graph writers who are just straight graph writers, and that's all I do, all the way up to, international artists and local like fine artists to, developers and political officials and city workers and stuff like that. And I often feel like I'm like a child stuck in a custody battle.
Right.
It's like, with change, there's always going to be some kind of negative connotation. It's kind of something that isn't quite hitting its mark. And I think it's as delicate as we would like to be. It's just the sad part of what it is. Like as areas develop, certain people and certain classes and unfortunately races kind of sometimes get the shaft on that, and it's a delicate conversation to have, and it's something I think that we could be more cognizant of and be more careful in our approach and redevelopment and that kind of thing, as far as like low income housing, help and support for people, and so it's interesting to see like how things are evolving and changing and stuff like that. But I feel like Denver's doing a fairly good job. I think if the locals could come together a little bit more and support each other, I think that would be amazing. But again, that's on a case by case individual scenario, like how that all works out. So to me, it's like it's the ebbs and flows of any kind of growth and change. And with growth, it's hard, but at the end, like a lot of times it could be good. And I do feel like a lot of the locals here are strong in their voice, and if they could just support each other a little bit more and come together a little bit more, it would be a lot better for the outcome.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a lot of scarcity mentality around artists not wanting to like create community, or what do you feel like is the block there with creating more togetherness?
I think a lot of it is language barrier and then cultural change, and like with this evolving street art thing, you're starting to see more fine art and gallery stuff and critiques, and like you're starting to see people who don't know a thing about graffiti, but like are all about, I want this street art on my building because it makes my building cool, and people come here. So there's this sort of little bit of animosity towards it's starting out being a voice of the voiceless, and something that empowered us to something that's being taken away, and like it's being changed into something that is just kind of blanketing what's really going on. So I think we have to be very careful in our narrative and what we're doing and where we're going with what's happening. But again, it's all about how we communicate, because it's not just what you're saying, but how you say it. And I feel like if more people took time to really sit and resonate with what's going on and formulate a good response, instead of just reacting,
Yeah.
I think would be a lot better off, because I think we're a culture that is based off of just reaction. And I think, for lack of a better term, like Bigger Brother and like, media and, those sort of powers that they be are watching and can see that they can control masses just through, simple happenings. So what something Trump says can just turn my whole newsfeed into just garbage for days, and it just, I feel like people are just so easy to placate into that division and that hate and separation that, we forget that we're all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it gets, I mean, you can get stuck in a vortex. It's like, and then 30 minutes goes away and your whole day is gone and you're pissed off the rest of the day. It's not worth it. It's not worth
didn't
it.
resolve anything.
Nothing, yeah.
Resolve it. Like, there's problems and there's issues out there, but if you haven't taken the time to think about solutions and positive solutions, and you're just coming to the table complaining about something, like, that's not helping at all in my eyes.
Yeah, to me, it's almost like that's part of the problem instead of figuring out what can you actually do. Yeah.
Right.
So I know that you are a brand new dad, Ronan. Is that how you say his name?
Yes, ma'am.
How has how old is he now? Because he looks little. He's
just coming up on 3 months.
Oh.
And a couple of days ago, 3-4 days ago, is his first time rolling over, and like he's just definitely softened my heart so much, and just watching each day his world getting bigger and bigger, and like making that eye contact with him, and then like smiling, and then he smiles and giggles, and it's just like it's such an amazing feeling. I had my first child. I have my daughter's almost 16, and she lives in Maine most of the time and comes out to visit out here. So it's a pretty large gap. And I was really young when I had her, which I'm grateful for, because I definitely felt like it grounded me. But I definitely feel like now I'm in a much better place, in a much better headspace, to be able to, dive into this a little bit more and feel a little more comfortable where, I've kind of already done this, so I know what to expect, and it seems a little bit easier and a little bit like less stressful this time,
Right.
because I was, again, I was young and I didn't know all the things, but now I'm like, oh yeah, he's drooling a lot. That means he's starting to teeth. Like, there's nothing to worry about. Like, it's like with the first child, it's like every little thing you're like, oh my God, what's happening with them? You okay? Are they okay? Like, so now it's just like it's a little bit easier. And my wife is such an amazing woman. She's sort of the opposite of me. She's into the arts, and she loves music a lot. But she's she works at a hospital, and she's at a regular schedule and like routine.
Right.
And very much like the house is spotless, and she like I'll leave little messages, and like I'm like in my mind I'm like I'll get to that later, and she's like, no, this needs to be cleaned up now. And like he's just like almost following me around, like, oh my God, this guy. But in a sense, it's good, because it's kind of like I'm wild, and like I don't have an exact schedule or a time, or I have to be places and that kind of thing. Like, I write my own schedule. I work for myself. Fly by the seat of my pants kind of thing. Like, when I'm out there, like, and it's kind of, she grounds me and I elevate her kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it works out. And for a while there, I was always into this whole fantasy of like wanting to, date an artist and travel the world and paint with this person and just be creative with them, which is fine and that works for some people. But a lot of times, like, for me, it was just like, oh, now we're in competition with each other or this and that. It was just a weird thing to try to navigate. And, once I've known her for, close to 15, 16 years. And then, once we started dating, I was just like, this just feels so natural. And, we got pregnant. We have our little Ronan, and he's the light of my life. And like, I just every day wake up and am happy to be where I am. And every day when I go home, I'm like, no matter how hard my day may have been, or what kind of difficult encounters I may have had with someone's opinion about what I'm doing, or opinion about this, or social issues that are going on. Like, I can go home and I see them, and it just melts me. So
Yeah, that's
that's,
amazing.
yeah, it's such an amazing thing to have in my life. It's such a nice environment to have in my home life. And as crazy as things can be out here in the streets and in society,
Yeah,
like having that soft space to land when I get home it's just so wonderful.
that's amazing. What do you hold sacred besides, obviously the wife and Ronan?
Hmm. I would say still that ability to be able to create anything out of nothing. I joke around and say I could drop all this and leave all this and draw on napkins for the rest of my life. So just that, being able to be a creative being, and as crazy as things may seem here in the United States, like really being aware of how fucked up things are in the rest of the world,
Yeah.
and how good we actually have it, and how there is so much change going on, and that if we focus more on positive and positive outcomes, and trying to uplift each other, that could actually be the actual catalyst for what we want to be and what we were striving to be. Um, I had a thing, like, even with when Donald Trump got voted into office, and how everyone, like where I was hanging out watching the news, just started crying, and like everyone was so sad, and like all this negative energy and just mourning, and I thought to myself, well, what if everyone who felt this way instead stopped for a minute and like meditated and thought and like sent him positive energy, like, yo, you're in a position, you're in this position now, like, I want you to do good for us.
Right.
Right,
Instead of wanting him to fail.
right, and like wanting to be right. Like, I think people are so stuck on wanting to be right instead of wanting to be, with each other. Like in present. Like, I think, I hold on to pouring positive energy into things, and pouring that positive energy out will reflect back on you. And when you're doing so, like, the world has a way of like testing you and throwing, monkey wrench in what you're doing, and you just got to persevere and keep going. And like, sometimes I'll hit roadblocks like that, and it'll take me a while to process what's going on. But I like to think that even with some negative things that happen, there should be some kind of silver lining, and there should be some kind of light at the end of those things. So I hold on to that power of intention, that power of what you do, what you say becomes what you do, and what you do becomes what you are.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that I just recently had to reteach myself. Things happened in my life, both my parents passing away, going through some struggling times where, may have found dark areas in my life that a lot of times artists sort of feed off of.
Yeah.
Some of our best work is when we're going through our hardest points in our life, which I think we should be able to change that narrative, and some of our best work should be when we are having the most powerful and like moving and inspiring and good times in our life.
Yes.
I'm tired of this narrative of the starving artist, or like he was so tormented, his work was so good. Like, I don't want to hear that shit anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I'm tired of that narrative of like, artists can't be business people. Like, I think the more artists that are involved in business, maybe the better business would be. And so I hold on to like the ability to create wherever, whatever, but being able to recognize, like, what am I doing? Is this for the greater good, or is this just feeding my ego, or feeding, into something that isn't serving me? So that's kind of like what I hold on to, especially of recently. Like, there's always going to be naysayers out there, and there's always going to be people who have opinions about this and that and the other, but if you're able to hold on to your authenticity and like the direction of what you're doing, and not let people's opinions of you dictate who you feel you are, like, then you're doing it. So that's kind of what I.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm a big, like, you're preaching, like, amen to all of that. I mean, I had that a lot with music where I felt like I had to blood, sweat, and tears and cry and all of that in order for songs to be good or gigs to be good, and starving artist mentalities. So much of that, we've gone through that, and I am now in such a different place where I write from such a higher frequency. So I'm happy to hear you say that as well, that I definitely feel like a lot of artists have that power to change that narrative. So I'm really happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, I'm tired of that narrative of, like, when an artist passes away, they're like, one of the first questions is, oh, did they OD?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're so depressed and we're so sad that we have to consume, drugs and alcohol to make ourselves feel better, to the point to where we are blanketing when running from our issues. And it's just like, I hate that narrative. Like,
Yeah.
young artist passes away, oh, they must have OD'd, or it must have been drug or something like that, or suicide, or like, that narrative needs to change. Like, we can't be losing our artists like that, and that can't be the norm.
No. So what would you say to a young artist that's coming up that, really wants to be a graffiti artist and looks to you and says, hey, what can I do? What would 3 things that you would tell him or her to do?
One is to be careful what's inspiring you. Be careful what you're feeding. 2 would be to find a mentor or a group of mentors and fully support and dive in, and not only study and figure out the application of what they're doing, but the culture behind it, where it's coming from, why it's there, what's going on. 3 would be in seeing all these things and inspired by all these things, still be true to who you are. Be yourself first and foremost, and give recognition to what inspired you to become who you are. So those are kind of like, there's different levels and all that. Those are the basic 3 things, I'll say.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I so appreciate it. You're amazing. I really love what you're doing, and I support you, and I'm around. So if you need for this little community center thing, you better holler.
I appreciate it, man. I definitely will.
You got the DJ music mentor right here. I got you.
Yeah, and like like I said, I love rec centers, and I love places where we can go and build our physical strength and our sports and stuff like that. But again, I feel like we need places like that for the minds. I need, there's libraries and stuff like that, but I just think, like, there's a new formula that should be developed that could really help elevate community and change and invoke change.
Yeah, it's like art is important. Music is important. Creating it's so important. So yeah.
And if you look at the study, like anthropology and stuff like that, they're always studying art. They're always, art is the voice of the times of what's going on, and I think we need to just be able to elevate that a little bit more and celebrate it a little bit more and respect that a little bit more.
I love that. So where can people find you? Where's the best way to find out about Crush Walls?
People can find me usually, I'm out here in the community painting, doing murals, doing workshops, doing activations and stuff like that. But you can find me at crushwalls.org, and there'll be, updates and stuff like that. You can find me on social media, on Instagram at Dread ICRGOD. So that's Dread ICR God. You can email me at dread@coloradocrush.org.
Well, thank you so much, Robin. It was a pleasure having you. You can come back anytime and tell us what you're up to.
Thank you, Allison.
So that's it for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed my conversation with Robin. If you did, leave us a review. It helps a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. I will also tag all of his information in the show notes so that you can connect with him on the socials and online. And if you're looking for a tribe that shares the same values as you, a tribe that is filled with like-minded creatives, a tribe that is supportive of your vision, mission, and dreams, then connect with me and your future best friends right now now on the Remix Your World Insiders Facebook group. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Just a heads up, if you are new to meditating and you have no idea where to start and are looking for a little guidance, I've got something for you. I produced something called the Mindful Mixtape, and I'll send it to you. It's 5 guided meditations led by me, all put to music. If you are interested in downloading this, text the words meditate now to 44222, and I'll send that to you now. Or you can find it at remixyourworld.com.